Just the ways, I can't fucking, my brain isn't working
Word
today.
sounds hard this day.
Hey, it's Sue.
And Megan,
The
Spine Breakers.
And today we are doing Josh's Doughnut book tag.
We are. So he created the tag, he also tagged us in it, and Josh does these really cool foodie book tags.
And they're very, like, well thought out.
They are.
Not your typical tag questions.
You actually have to put some thought into them.
Yeah.
So,
Which is why it took us a while to get to this.
because, you know, we like to wing it.
Right.
So we are going to drink this Mango Milkshake IPA from Brewing.
Yeah, I couldn't find a donut beer. I know one exists, or at least used to, but I couldn't find it.
This can kind of matches our, because there's like the green and the oranges.
But I thought, you know, donut milkshake,
They're sweet treats.
similar. So we're gonna try it. Also, like, mango milkshake IPA sounds
That's a lot of things.
weird to me. So let's see how it goes. It smells like an IPA.
Yeah, it smells like a mango-y IPA.
I don't even smell like mango. It's okay.
It just tastes like an IPA to me.
I can taste like maybe a hint of mangoiness, but yeah, not much. It's mostly just
Mostly
IPA.
just IPA-ish.
It's okay.
It's
All right.
crisp.
So let's get into the questions.
Let us do that.
So the first one is classic. A classic book you feel everyone needs to read.
And I think we both chose more modern classics
Yeah.
for this question. So I said The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood because I feel like it's very timely. And I think that the show has kind of served to bring more attention to the book and to Margaret Atwood in general. So I think that everyone should read it, male, female, whomever, and get woke.
Get woke.
Yeah.
And I said The Color Purple by Alice Walker because I think it's just really important to read those kinds of stories that tell the stories that you don't typically hear, I guess, you know? And I also just really liked the relationships in the book, and even the really dysfunctional ones were really nuanced, and I don't know,
They were all very layered and complex, even if they were very unhealthy or very, you know, abusive or strange relationships. They were all very
and how
layered.
the characters develop as the book goes on is really interesting.
It
too.
really is. And I love the way it was written because it was very simplistic, but it was very, like, just beautiful. And
Yeah.
So the second question is Vanilla Frosted, which is a simple but engaging work.
I said Never Let Me Go by Katsuo Ishiguro. I just read this. I finished it a week or two ago. And it's simple in that the writing style is very simple, which I wasn't expecting for some reason. I guess maybe because it was like shortlisted for the Man Booker and all that. I was expecting it to be more of a complex writing style. But no, it's written very simply. But I don't know, the themes are just really complex, I think.
They are.
And it's very
Gripping.
yeah. It's gripping, and my brain's not fucking working right now for some
God damn it.
reason. What's the thing I'm looking for? It's like the emotion in it, I think,
Yeah.
is really...
It's very poignant. Like the emotion just really kind of, it's written simply, but it cuts deep.
Yes.
I kind of went a little different direction with it. I said Hex by Thomas Old Huvelt and translated by Nancy Forrest Filer, Forrest Flyer. But this is a story of a witch I believe it's in a New England state, and it's like the ghost of a witch. And it's a really simple kind of, you know, New England witch tale. Like, there's nothing, but it was really gripping. Like, it sucked me in. I really enjoyed reading it. But there was a lot more to the witch. Like, it wasn't just, you know, oh, she's a witch and she's haunting us. Like, she was more complex than that. And so I thought it was very simple, nothing really out of the ordinary. The writing was pretty simple, but the book was very engaging. And I was actually rooting for the witch a little bit there at the end.
Really?
That was a little bit. like, all right, girl, get him. I don't care.
Did you get it, Murphy?
No, did you get the bug?
I think you might have got it.
Did he make a surprised and then grossed out face?
I didn't see his face.
No, because that's how you know. Because he's like really
And he's
surprised.
like, yay! Oh.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. He's like, oh god, oh gross.
All right, so question 3 is Chocolate Frosted, your second favorite work from your favorite writer.
I went with the Lilith's Brood series for this by Octavia Butler, the queen herself, the magnificent and wonderful Octavia Butler. So I think that my favorite book or books by her are now the Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents duology. I fucking love those. And it's really hard to beat Lilith's Brood because I think it's amazing and it's a very, 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 very close second. Mm-hmm. But the series really builds on itself and it keeps getting better and better the further you go into it.
Yeah. It was interesting because Adam said he had the opposite experience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he liked Dawn and then thought they got worse and worse. And I definitely felt the total opposite.
Same, yeah. It just like starts out brilliant and just ends like even more brilliant. But she, I mean, we always talk about this, but she tells a very timely and modern story. And a story that deals with very real themes and real issues, but she tells it in a very sci-fi way.
Right.
And she really uses sci-fi as a kind of a social justice platform, and I think that's really boss the way that she does it.
And I think that a lot of sci-fi writers do the same.
I agree.
Which baffles me why sci-fi is not as well respected as I think it should be.
Right. Now, are there a lot of campy sci-fi novels? Fuck yeah, there are.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot of sci-fi novels that have a lot to say, and if you know, you know.
Yeah. So for me, I actually said the opposite of what Megan said because Lilith's Brood is still my number 1 with Octavia Butler. Something about that series just really gets me.
It's so fucking good.
And so I said the Parable of the Sower / Talents series, duology rather, was still really amazing, but for me it was a second place.
So the next Doughnut is a Strawberry Frosted, which is a lesser known or studied work from a known writer you feel should be read and studied more frequently.
So I said The Man Who Lived Underground by Richard Wright. He's not as well known as a lot of other authors, but most people who know him probably think of Native Son, which is a great book, but The Man Who Lived Underground is a short story by him. I just really loved it. It has some similar themes to Native Son. It's about a man who is, in this case, he's falsely accused of a crime, and so he goes underground to hide from the police because, of course, since he's a black man and it's set probably in like the 30s or 40s, even if it's a minor crime, that's going to be very bad news for him. And it's kind of about him and like what he experiences hiding underground. And it also probably holds a special place for me because I had this professor in college and I took a class that was a case study of Richard Wright with this professor. And I'm very used to like easily getting A's. And with him, I could not get a fucking A on a paper for him. I would get B's and C's usually, mostly B's, but I could not get a motherfucking A. And it was so frustrating to me, and I never did during that class. But then I took him again for African American literature a couple years later, which is funny because he was a nerdy white guy. And he was teaching African American
fashion,
and his wife actually taught. I took his wife for women's lit, which is where I was first introduced to Octavia Butler because she had us read Kindred and Bloodchild. But anyway, but for an African American lit, we read The Man Who Lived Underground as well as a ton of other stuff. And one of our assignments was to choose any work we had read that year and then do like a literary analysis of something, of something in it. And so I chose The Man Who Lived Underground, and I wrote about the use of the colors black and white and like what they represented in the story. And I got a fucking A!
Got the A! Got the A!
And he was like, I had never thought of this before. And I was like, look at me, a professional literary analyzer. Whatever.
Analyst.
That's probably the word.
Literary analyst.
Analyst. That's the word I was looking for.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there together. It's fine. I went with Herland by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I know I've mentioned this book a few times, but I think what you most hear from her is The Yellow Wallpaper, the short story, which is brilliant. But I think that Herland is so, like, fun and interesting. It's funny. Like, there are some parts of it that just cracked my shit up. But it's basically an early 1900s feminist adventure novel. Like, this group of men goes on this, you know, adventure they're exploring, and they come across this utopian, you know, feminine society where men don't exist.
Murphy, do you want outside?
Booger butt. His sister's barking. But yeah, so it's fun, it's funny, it explores some kind of traditional gender roles and flips them, and it kind of thinks about the idea of what if men didn't exist in a society and what would that look like. So I really like it. I think Charlotte Perkins Gilman is brilliant, and I think it's a good read.
The next donut is Glazed, a writer that immediately immersed you.
I picked a couple. So Octavia Butler, I read her at Sue's recommendation, fell in love with her. She is the queen. She's amazing. But then also Mira Grant. I had read Every Heart a Doorway, which she wrote under her, I think Mira Grant is her pseudonym, and Shauna McGuire is her actual name. I might have those reversed, but I think that's how it is. But I read that and enjoyed it. And then I read the Newsflesh trilogy and was like immediately sucked in. Like, first book, first few pages, just poof, sucked in. And so now I read like there's a bunch of novellas and little like half novels and short stories and things like that she wrote that take place in that universe, and I'm just like sold on everything.
And I said Hugh Howey because that wool silo series, like, yeah. I was immediately in it. I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Mm-hmm. And it really sucked me in immediately. And every book, all 3 books in that trilogy are great.
Yeah, they're solid. They're good.
Yeah.
The next donut is Jelly, which is a work that contained more than you expected.
And I said World War Z by Max Brooks. I went into it just expecting like a silly zombie novel. But everything he goes into with, you know, how people react to this and the different scenarios, which a lot of which were things that I never even thought about.
True. Yeah, like a couple of the things in that book blew my fucking mind.
Yeah. And how different countries react, you know, politically and things like that was just really fascinating to me. And I think it was much more nuanced than just a typical zombie novel.
Agree. I chose The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid because that was a book that was super hyped. And so I wanted to read it because it sparked my interest, but I was a little bit nervous to read it. First of all, because of all the hype, and I was like, well, usually if there's a lot of hype, my excitement doesn't really add up. But then also, it seemed like it was very like old Hollywood, and I don't care about that. But this book contained so much more than that. Like, got me in my feels, like it was just a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. Like, I fucking loved it.
The next donut is Boston Cream, a scholarly work you would recommend to a casual reader.
I had a difficult time choosing something for this question because I was confused about the definition of scholarly, and then also, I don't know that I read a whole lot that would qualify, because I don't read a ton of classics or, you know, whatever, but I ended up going with The Lord of the Flies by William Golding, because I feel like that is kind of a classic. Some people study it in school. I enjoyed it. It's about these kids who get marooned on an island and shit ensues. It's a bunch of young boys.
Some crazy shit.
Some fucking crazy shenanigans ensue. And I think it speaks to the nature of humanity, but, you know, I also think it speaks to like how life unfolds when there is no voice of reason, or when the voice of reason is quieter than the voice of mayhem. You know, so I think there's some deeper themes there, but obviously.
Sounds a little familiar.
Sounds timely. I will say that, like, I had heard about how, like, fucked up and twisted the book was, and it was, but, like, not what I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be much worse. Like, I was expecting, like, cannibalism and crazy shit, and, like, no, there's not. but it was fucked up, so.
And I said Kindred by Octavia Butler because I read that in college. I was assigned to read that. We studied it in my women's lit class. So that makes it scholarly.
I would say so.
I think. Yeah, and it's definitely something that I think a casual reader would really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's got some uncomfortable things in it, for sure.
Yeah.
But most people I know who have read it really liked it.
It's more accessible, I think, to people who are not necessarily into sci-fi novels, but it has some light sci-fi elements.
It's barely sci-fi,
It's
really.
barely sci-fi.
It's more historical fiction.
It really is.
I would call it.
Yeah,
but
same. Like, my mom really enjoyed it, and she doesn't care for sci-fi at all.
Yeah.
So. Alright, so the next donut is Crawler.
I think that's how you say it.
It's a work that makes you think of France. France.
I said The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This was, I think, set in France, or mostly set in France. I know that Napoleon played a large part in it. I mean, he wasn't exactly a character, but, you know,
he was around.
He was around.
Yeah.
And Alexandre Dumas, I think, was French. I mean, I think he lived in France anyway.
And I said Bad Marie by Marcy Dermansky, which is the most fucking god-awful book, and I hate that this is the book I picked for this, but I picked this because the references to France in this book were so goddamn ridiculous. It's about this nanny who she nannies for this husband and wife, and the husband is French. And it would say things in this book that were so goddamn ridiculous, like, he made them croissants for breakfast because he was French. Like, that's a sentence. Like, I'm not ad-libbing. Like, that's an example of a sentence. And so I feel like they were trying to make it exotic, or she was trying to make it exotic, and so she was really reaching with the French thing, and she kept pointing it out. So, unfortunately, sorry, France, but that's what I think of when that's what reminds me of it. It makes me think of it.
Donut number 9 is Powdered Sugar, a work that left you with evident emotions.
I said Close Your Eyes, Hold Hands by Chris Bahalian. This was a book I read on a friend's recommendation. There's a town close to a nuclear power plant. There's a problem with one of the reactors. A kind of Chernobyl situation happens and it gets evacuated. And it's about this girl whose parents worked at the factory, or at the reactor site. And so obviously you can assume what happened to them. She ends up orphaned. Her life is not awesome from there. And it's really brutal for her, and like that was hard enough, but like this is gonna sound crazy. There's a dog. And I'm trying not to spoiler it, but just know that I'm not going to read a book where a dog dies. So just keep that in your mind if you want to read this book. But there was a point there was a situation where like I ended up ugly crying. Ugly cried, just got the snuffs. It was rough. So be prepared.
And I said The Shock of the Fall by Nathan Filer. We used to talk about this book
because it's so good. It's so good.
But it's about a man dealing with his mental illness and also thinking back on this traumatic event that happened in his childhood. And I full on ugly cried reading like the whole second half of that book. Basically, I was just like, oh my god. Yeah, but I loved it. I thought it was amazing.
The next donut is Cider, the perfect reading material to read in front of a fire in autumn.
And I said The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I think that, when I think of like cozy autumn reads, I think of like spooky shit.
Same.
And The Haunting of Hill House is so atmospheric.
Yeah.
And it's kind of subtly spooky.
It sneaks up on you.
It's subtly. The show was full on spooky.
It's full on spooky. But the book will creep up on you.
Yeah. And so I think it just really has that sort of autumn vibe.
I went the same direction. I said Horror Store by Grady Hendrix because again, in the fall I like to read spooky shit. And Horror Store was a kind of fun, spooky thing. It is about basically an American version of IKEA, and it's built upon a plot of land where an asylum used to sit, and so ghosts and craziness.
It sounds like, well, I guess not. I was gonna say it reminds me of like The Crescent.
Oh, there's a really cool lore episode about the Crescent.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating.
That's a hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. We've been there. I've never stayed there.
No, we've never stayed there. We walked through it though.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Didn't see anything spooky.
There's an episode of the podcast lore about it, and I can't remember the title of it, but it was really
My sister, like, I think she stayed there and went on the ghost tour and everything, and she said she didn't see shit.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Yeah. Number 11 is Doughnut Hole, a collection of short, accessible works or sections that you enjoyed.
I said Difficult Women by Roxane Gay. I would say this is accessible. I think it's kind of a feminist easy reader, if you will. There are short stories about diverse types of women and diverse circumstances, and yeah, a lot of them do cover some really uncomfortable territory. But they're short stories, so they're over quickly.
Yeah. You can read one and then put it down. And
hyperventilate, and then, wash yourself until you feel clean, and then come back to it. Drink a bottle of wine. I think they were that bad. No, they weren't. They really weren't, but I like I said, I do think it's really accessible. Feminist short stories. So I think that there wasn't a story in that collection I didn't like. There were some I liked more than others, but there weren't any in there that I thought were bad. So I really dug it.
And I said Bitch Planet, which is a graphic novel series by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Valentine Delandro. And it's a feminist dystopian where if women commit any kind of indiscretion, they get sent to this giant prison planet called Bitch Planet.
Bitch Planet. The 12th donut and last donut is Raspberry Frosted, which is a book that you would recommend to Homer Simpson.
And I said Making Marriage Work for Dummies. Because why Marge hasn't left his ass, I don't know. I think she did. I mean, she did at one point, but then she came back. But Homer's not always the best husband, so I think that
he could use some work.
Yeah.
And I don't watch The Simpsons, so I don't know, but I said Bowling for Dummies, because apparently Homer likes to bowl.
And I was thinking about the episode which this ties into my pick too, Homer gets a birthday gift for Marge, and it's a bowling ball with his name inscribed on it because he knows that she doesn't actually want it, and that'll end up being his.
Right.
So he gets his own name
inscribed in the bowling ball.
So, not a great husband.
Nope, pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Pretty terrible.
Alright, so next is, what's your favorite kind of donut?
Maple glazed.
I don't know. Donuts are not my dessert of choice. But I do like, this seems like a really basic answer, but I like the Krispy Kreme cream-filled donuts. I like those. I also, for some reason, really like those terrible, little
fucking plastic ass.
Yes, with the waxy chocolate on it. I don't know why.
No,
I
fucking love those things.
Bad.
I eat them at work all the time, and afterwards, my mouth is covered in plastic, and I'm like,
they leave a waxy film on your roof of your mouth.
I regret.
They're Hostess or some brand like that.
Yeah.
Little mini chocolate covered donuts.
Stupid little donuts,
Yeah, they're the worst.
They're awful, but I love them.
I don't know why I like them.
No, same. Love them. So, lastly, it's time to make the donuts, as per Dunkin' Donuts. Who do you tag?
I have never
made the donuts.
I've never had Dunkin' Donuts.
I have had their coffee. I don't know if I've had their donuts.
I don't think I've even had their coffee. There's only one Dunkin' Donuts here, and it's not close to my house at all.
No, it's way the fuck on the south side.
Also, it's only been here for a couple years.
If that, yeah.
Yeah. I think there used to be one here, and then it was gone for a long time, and then it came back.
But I've
never had Dunkin' Donuts. How about Acacia Ives? We haven't tagged her in a long time.
No, we haven't.
All the World's a Page. Janelle. How about Paperback Junky?
Yeah, that sounds good.
So those are the people we tag. This beer, it doesn't taste like mango really much at all.
No.
It's just kind of a mediocre IPA.
Yeah. Ain't nothing special.
Yeah, so I haven't had anything from them that I really was that into.
No, same. I haven't been super excited about anything they make.
Yeah. So that was our donut book tag. Let us know what you thought of our answers.
Yeah, if you
what's
read
your
any of this
favorite
stuff?
donut?
Yeah.
Should I try Dunkin' Donuts? I don't know.
Should we go there? I don't know. But yeah, so thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.